Okay. All right. So if we just start taking a snapshot at 1925, what the country's looking like, 116 million people are living there, um, which is making America one of the larger nations of the world already in the 1920s. The cost of a Model T is down to $300, and the national income has gone up. So consumer credit goes up during the 1920s. This is really when the installment plan becomes popular. Like, hey, buy now, pay later. And it's not credit cards. We're not there, but different companies will offer installment plans for their products. So Singer sewing machines. They'd have like these attractive like models like sewing stuff and showing you, look how easy this is. Look, wouldn't it be quicker to do the sewing if you had one of these? Yeah, but I can't afford, $75 for a sewing machine. Well, that's okay. Just, put $8 down today and take it home and pay the rest off, in monthly installments. The average size of a family's dropped significantly in the 1920s because it's in the 1920s that America passes over the urbanization mark, where more of the country's living in urban centers than in kind of rural areas. Less people are farming. Farming's getting more industrial, more mechanized. So you need fewer people to do it, which definitely means you don't need as many children, even if you are a farmer. And less people being farmers, you really don't need more children because if you're not a farmer, kids are not adding to your family economy, usually. The urban poor they are because they have to. All the kids are going and working in factories, starting at young ages. But even that's starting to shift in the 1920s. There's, progressive reform to change that up, to get kids out of factories and mines. But overall, employment's not high. The 20s are, I think they're remembered in the collective consciousness of Americans as a good decade. Like the 20s was a good decade. The way that I think America thinks that about the 50s and maybe the 80s. Like, oh, those were the good old days. And all three of those decades, they all three followed periods of intense change and disruption to the status quo. And all three were a return to normalcy in some regard, in some aspect. And all three of them were also decades of consumerism. Like they were high on the consumerism of new goods and products and services. So in the 20s, it's things like, household appliances, families getting a car for the first time. In the 50s, it'll be a lot more things of convenience and toys, right? Like those are going to become a bigger thing in the 50s. The 80s, it's a whole influx of cheap things from Asia, primarily China, because it gets open to trade in the mid 70s from Richard Nixon's visit there. So a whole flood of new consumer gadgets like Sony Walkman and CD players and stuff like that, VHS players in the 1980s. And if you're familiar with the story of Gatsby, it highlights kind of the consumerism, hedonism of the decade that was fun and glittery and shiny and lots of new stuff, but also maybe a little hollow, like internally, like it was a superficial decade. Because while when the country's busy distracting itself with new gadgets and traveling and those kinds of things, those don't tend to be the times where we produce like the deepest thoughts of the generation. But the 1930s in the Great Depression will certainly be that, right? Where people are looking inward a little bit more. There's more self-reflection. The 60s will be turbulent because of the Vietnam War and racial segregation and the problems going on there. And So people are much more self-aware and conscious of kind of the whole system. Um, and the 90s, I don't know that the 90s become that, because this Cold War ends. So it's almost like a victory lap for the 80s is kind of how I see the 90s. But certainly come 2001 and 9/11, that makes everybody stop and think and hit pause on kind of the consumerism of the moment. With the country getting roads, I think this is a time lapse of Route 66. This is cool. You can see somebody drove the whole thing from Chicago to LA, and that's the route that Route 66 completes in the 20s, marking a huge milestone for America that we've got a road, a highway that is connecting the sides. The East Coast had been built up with more roads. There's more people there, and the population centers are closer to one another. Then, once you get to the West, everything gets so spread out, and far away. So having like a paved road, and not just a paved road, but a paved road with like amenities along it. So gas stations, service stations are a new thing. Like they've got to be installed, especially if people want to make these cross-country voyages. And then it takes a long time because this is not a freeway, you can see. And the cars are just not like 50s of plenty fine fast speed for people to be traveling. 45 even. These are people that are transitioning from the horse. They're not as in a rush as the modern folks in cars are these days. So this has taken a while. It's going to take you days and days to traverse. So a new institution pops up along Route 66 called the Motor Hotel or Motel, right? Like it is not a fancy hotel. They're almost always one story, right? The rooms are right there, right by your car, right? They're built for people in cars that are staying for a night. You're not staying there on vacation. You're not, traveling to go stay in this luxurious place. It's kind of bare bones servicing something that people need though in this trip that they're frequently making. Yeah, some of Route 66 is not there today, or it's been paved over by I think the 40 runs a lot of like, I think that was on the 40 right there. Runs a good portion of the Route 66, but it came right through here. It came through Victorville. So if you drive through like Old Town Victorville, you can see the historic Route 66 section of it, and then down through like San Bernardino, and then Santa Monica Boulevard to the ocean. So it's connecting. Yeah, this is like, oh, they broke down, I think. And this is getting close to the Victorville section. Oh, there's Barstow. There in Santa Monica at the end. Yeah. The I go on Tuesday nights. I don't know when I can afford the time and gas. I go down to I've got friends that do a trivia group at Barney's Beanery in West Hollywood. That's on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's been there since the 20s. It like opened when Route 66 opened as like an old roadhouse. Like it's kind of got a dive bar vibe, but it's West Hollywood. So it's like if Disneyland made a dive bar, it's like, this is not a dive bar. There's not going to be any fights in here. Like, we have dive bars here. Like, we have real ones. That's a nice one, but it's still an old original building, and they've got all these old license plates all along the wall behind the bar, because for travelers that would come through, if they couldn't afford a meal, Barney, the owner would say like, hey, leave your license plate and you'll get a cup of soup and a soda. And most people weren't going back to Illinois or wherever they were traveling from, so they just traded in their license plate for some food. I know it's kind of cool, and it's a for West Hollywood, it's pretty cheap too. Like it's not actually an expensive joint. So if you're ever looking for a cool place to hang out, Barney's Beanery is like one of my favorites, but it's one of these spots that opened up on Route 66 to service all these travelers. And so this is in the 1920s is really when you see LA start to just begin to really grow and expand rapidly. 100 years before that, like there's not a city in Los Angeles. There's a mission and farmers. Like there's just not a lot here. One of the other reasons LA can grow in the 1920s is in 1913 or 14, the Mulholland Aqueduct opens up, right? Bringing water from Northern California down to Southern California because we don't have a big natural river or body of water. Like ecologically speaking, there should not be this many people living in Southern California at all. There should be very few people living here. Like we have a lot of water here. I can't support the amount of people that live here unless we, drain Mono Lake and steal all of their resources, which the people of Northern California did not like. Farmers blew up chunks of the aqueduct when it opened up to like stop it. Like they were sabotaging it. There's still bad blood, between Northern and Southern California over the aqueduct. But LA's, it becomes very iconic and synonymous with the movies. And in the 1920s, you see just a flourishing, a booming in Hollywood of the industry. Movies were, they were popular before the 20s. All the teens, their movie houses were popping up everywhere. But the production really goes up after the war. And Hollywood becomes increasingly the centralized place where that's going to take over. And there's like ecological reasons for that too, right? You're filming, a lot of stuff is going to be filmed outside, and it doesn't rain a lot here. Like you've got, I don't know, 340 days out of the year you can probably film outside in Southern California. And within, an hour from Hollywood in different directions, you're at the beach, you're out in plains, grassland, you're in the mountains, you're at the desert. You basically have all the topographies you'd want to shoot things on. Even Catalina Island, they used that a lot to film movies during this time period, and they actually shipped a bunch of bison, buffalo out there for some Western movie, and then just left them. So there's like a herd of buffalo that roams Malibu because they're just, in a million years when people find a bunch of buffalo bones out there, they're gonna be like, the hell, how did these things get out here? This is totally unrelated, but Pablo Escobar, the drug lord, right? He had a private zoo, and after he got caught, like they kind of emptied out the zoo, and he had hippos, and they couldn't get a zoo to take the hippos, so they just were like roaming free in the like Colombian jungle and started breeding, and they're destroying part of the ecosystem where they're at because apparently their urine is very toxic. So Colombia's got like a hippo problem now, thanks to Pablo Escobar. Weird fact that you didn't need to know for this class, but now you do. So well, I'm gonna play maybe like the first, I don't know, 10 minutes or so of this movie. We can sit back and enjoy. It. Obviously, it's not the clown movie, so don't worry there. It is referring to the it factor, or the idea of like sexiness. Like this is a new kind of concept in culture, or at least a concept that people are talking about. And sex appeal and kind of fashion and how all that's flowing together. So it's a nice snapshot into the 1920s and what kind of maybe what people were thinking about, what their values were, It takes place in a department store, which in and of itself is a rather new creation, only a few decades old at this point. So let's watch some of this. It's a funny movie. It's a rom-com. It's a silent film, but it's a rom-com. So, maybe just take it in and see what you spot from this film. Hunter Boza, she's a very famous actress of the silver screen. She becomes known as the it girl from this movie. So this score is added for the silent film. They would have, of course, a live piano playing in the movie house because they're not synced with sound at all. And even so, amplification is not great. It is that quality possessed by some which draws all others with its magnetic force. With it, when all the men, if you're a woman, and all the women, if you're a man, binary can be a quality of the mind as well as the physical attraction. Were observations from this, like that's almost 100 years old. What's that?
He got forced into
Slumming it, man. He was not expecting that. I love all the dialogue. Sweet Santa Claus. We should bring some of this back. I'll take the snap out of your garter yet. I love old time lingo like that.
I thought it was a joke that they put the words that they said on, like, they actually did that.
Yeah, like,
Watch that.
yeah, because otherwise it's like, well, you're not gonna know. It'd just be all pantomiming because there's no sound. So it's like, and like, I mean, you can see like it's not a lot of dialogue. Like you're not reading a lot. They are doing a lot of like acting things out. One of the, if you, I mean, this is a pretty decent one if you want to make your way all the way through a silent movie. And it's, it's there, it's on YouTube, it's free to watch because it's past public domain. Probably the easiest one is Modern Times. It's actually filmed in 1936, well after they're doing talking movies. It's Charlie Chaplin's last silent film. And it's really good. It's funny. It's like thought-provoking and meaningful. And the film quality's higher than this, because it's it grows a lot in 10 years, the quality of it. So it's a black and white, it's silent, and there's very little dialogue in that, because it's all like situational comedy and slapstick kind of stuff. So they're not translating every word up there, but yeah, I know it's kind of wild. It's like, man, that's we don't watch silent movies anymore, that's for sure. I mean, geez, in today's day and age, it's pretty hard. It's hard to keep my attention on like the latest best HBO show or something like that. So it is like you have to be very intentional with watching a silent movie. You can't do other things. Like you have to just watch that. You can't be on your phone, or you'll miss the whole thing. So it's an intentional choice to make, but I'd encourage everybody, like, do one at least. It doesn't really matter which one. Old Buster Keaton movies are good. There's some good silent films out there. Nosferatu, if you're into, this is the classic Dracula.
Discovered I got a flat tire.
I don't want to hear about it. Metropolis is another one that's a little like kind of heady, but very aesthetically interesting. Silent movie. And so this is all going to change, though. Just 2 years later, I'll show you another clip. Yes, it is offensive. Yes, that is a man in black.
Mammy, the sun shines east and the sun shines west, but I know where the sun shines best. Mammy, Mammy, my heartstrings are tangled around Alabama. I'm a-coming.
So, like, I mean, this is shocks our sensibilities today, as it should. Commonplace in American culture in the 1920s and 30s. And a large part is that this is, blackface in general it's a cultural appropriation of black entertainment culture, which predates the Harlem Renaissance for sure. It's from plantations. We had large amounts of slaves that were secluded by themselves at night. And so, they're doing what people do. They're entertaining each other with song and dance and theatrics and dramas and all of that, which then gets appropriated by white people for their entertainment. And this is where vaudeville is the primary entertainment before movies, before silent movies. And sometimes they would have black entertainers entertaining white audiences in white-only theaters and clubs. But then more often than not, they'd have white entertainers pantomiming and dressed up as black entertainers in white-only clubs, because it's one layer removed. In segregationist mind, at least, is better. So directly lifting kind of not just the culture, but appearance and everything else. And so movies, the first movie theaters are vaudeville theaters. They're setting up screens and projectors in those theater houses. And then eventually usually converting them over to just movie theaters, because it's a lot cheaper than putting on an actual vaudeville show, and it's more lucrative. And movies are more popular. It's the new technology. But that underlying kind of base technology, if you will, of vaudeville theater is what early movies are. It's a reenactment of vaudeville for the silver screen. And then in 1920, they finally get the technology right to be able to record sound and sync it with the picture. And that movie right there that we just watched, the ending of, Jazz Singer, is the first, widely considered the first, at least commercially successful talkie film, and it totally changes the whole industry. All the studios are quickly trying to convert over to talking film technology, and silent movies, they go by the wayside real quick, because arguably a talking movie, especially if you've got song and music and stuff in there, it's much more compelling than a silent film. You've got more of the senses engaged. If I don't know if you've ever watched Singing in the Rain, that's my favorite one. But it's about this. It's made in the 50s, but it's about 1929 and kind of the chaos that the theaters underwent trying to change over to new technology really rapidly and keep up with the competition. If anybody saw Babylon that came out last year, it's a great movie. It got crap when it came out, but I think it's a good movie. It's like an X-rated version of Singing in the Rain. That's very depressing. So it shows the same thing, but from a very dramatic side, and kind of the toll it takes on the theater people and the silent film people who are displaced by the changing in technologies, because the whole industry changes radically. Like those guys talking in the seat, they weren't saying like the dialogue lines. They half the time they were like, "Where do you want to go for lunch later today?" And they're just putting the words up there. It's like you didn't have to actually say any. You didn't actually even have to really act very well, to be an actor in a silent movie. Of course, if you're expressive, it's helpful. But Singing in the Rain points that out very well. So, I mean, I love that movie. Everybody should watch Singing in the Rain. It's a really good movie. But it's dealing with this period, this transition. Oh, here's a clip from Singing in the Rain. We'll watch this because it's
All right, here we go. Quiet.
so the two actors here are silent film stars
She's got to talk into the mic. I can't pick it up.
that are trying to transition.
Cut.
What's the matter, Dexter? Lena. Look, Lena. Don't you remember I told you there's a microphone right there in the bush?
Yeah,
You have to talk into it.
I was talking, wasn't I, Miss Dinsmore?
Yes, my dear, but please remember round tones. Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
Yes, my dear, that's much better now.
She's like a silent film star, but like she talks like this, so they're
Here's
like,
the
"Oh
mic.
no, this is."
Right here in
Not
the
great.
bush.
Yeah,
Now you talk towards it. The sound goes through the cable to the box. A man records it on a big record in wax. But you have to talk into the mic first. In the bush. Now try it again.
gee, this is dumb.
Uh,
Oh, she'll get it, Dexter. Look, Lena, don't worry. We're all a little nervous the first day. Everything's going to be okay. Oh, by the way, Roscoe, you know the scene coming up where I say, Imperious Princess of the Night? I don't like those lines there. Is it all right if I just say what I always do? I love you, I love you, I love you.
Sure. Anyway, it's comfortable. But into the bush! Okay, again. Quiet! Roll 'em!
Shouldn't have anything with the dangers. They will surely find you out.
Cut! Lena, we're missing every other word. You've got to talk into the mic.
Well, I can't make love to a bush.
All right. We'll have to think of something else.
Oh, I thought it played the whole scene. They try out a bunch of different things. It's pretty funny. It's a funny movie if you're ever looking for a good one.
When Debbie Reynolds sings those movies, it's actually
Oh, really?
a real.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
And Debbie Reynolds, not so much. Interesting. I did not know that. I do now. That's pretty cool. The whole idea of like celebrity is something that really grows in the 1920s. So you have certain celebrities like Babe Ruth, here he is making his 60th home run. Play that in the background. But this is like what celebrities are. There's some sports stars. There's some maybe famous artists, but they're not celebrities in the way that we think of modern day celebrities. Babe Ruth is maybe really one of the first ones because he talks to the press. He's got like stunts that he's doing all the time, and he's a larger than life character. He's boisterous and always smoking cigars, and he's kind of a womanizer, and so the press follow him around as like not just a sports hero, but like as a person of popular interest. Musicians don't have that status yet, even famous ones, even like Duke Ellington. That it's not going to reach the level because like record sales are not really that big of a thing for the jazz music yet, because speakers aren't that good. By the time we get to the 40s, that's going to change. But one of the other early celebrities will be Charles Lindbergh, who he becomes world famous in 1927 because he's the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And it's in a plane like that. It's like an open cockpit plane. He's flying like 100 feet above the ocean most of the time, right? And the trip takes over 24 hours of straight flying. Stuff's breaking down while he's flying. He's having to like keep himself awake. There's no navigation system. He's flying by a compass and the stars. It's a crazy thing to think about doing. It's a plane he built too. And when he touches down in Paris, it is like there's a crowd of tens of thousands of people come out to greet him. He's instantly the most famous person in Europe. He becomes the most famous American around the world. And in America, he's celebrated as like a folk hero. And people, they follow him around, and he's a mechanic, I think, from North Carolina. Like he's not like a super well-educated person, but he's a celebrity. And so people listen to his thoughts on things, whether they should or not. And it turns out he's super anti-Semitic. And he's a big supporter of Hitler when Hitler comes to power. And maybe if somebody's famous, that doesn't mean we should let them inform our lives on our political decisions and morality and everything else. Like, why do people listen to the Kardashians about anything? I don't know. This is a new era in kind of superstardom celebrity where we've got video and pictures of these people now, where you didn't have that 50 years earlier for common people that would become celebrities and heroes in their own right. Yeah, thinking about his journey is just, it's wild. It's wild to think about. Let's see this.
Muncie's known as Middletown because during the 1920s, a husband and wife team of social scientists, Robert and Helen Lind, selected the city as the site of a close investigation of social and cultural life. And so they came to Muncie in 1924, spent about 18 months living in the city, collecting data, engaging in participant observation. They joined churches, they joined clubs, they went to public meetings, they had dinner parties with the locals, all these kinds of things, as a way of getting a handle on the impact of industrialization on the city's life. And so they produced a very long and ultimately very successful book called Middletown, A Study in Modern American Culture. So it was a bestseller. It became a standard text assigned in college classrooms. It was widely reviewed. It was widely praised. It remains in print. It's a classic sociological study, amongst the first and arguably the most important community study ever done. And as a result of its success, it spawned offspring. It produced a series of follow-ups. The Lindens themselves came back to Muncie in the 1930s to study the impact of the Great Depression. And other scholars have come since. There was a major replication of the original study during the 1970s. There was another smaller but still substantial replication during the late 1990s to mark the end of the 20th century. But in a sense, doing environmental work then fills a gap that ought to be filled and is certainly an important part of a community's life, particularly a community that is deindustrializing and so has all kinds of sites where environmental issues are tantamount. I mean, they're fundamental to figuring out what's going to happen next. We have all these industrial sites, these brownfields that need to be remediated, and so almost any move forward economically in Muncie is going to involve addressing environmental problems and concerns. The other way in which I think studies of the environment can help is that one of the key issues has been, in all of this research, has been the tension between the individual and the community, and the interests and the needs of a specific community. How do you weigh them against the sort of strong and traditional American emphasis on the individual and their rights and needs and concerns? And so environmental issues fit very nicely into that context because they involve, in many cases, they involve pitting the rights or the desires or the interests of an individual against the larger interests of the community.
So this study is like, it's groundbreaking that they do at the end of the 20s for many reasons. One, though, is taking seriously this idea of a suburb, right? And kind of the effect of suburban living and what that looks like. Because now that we're a few decades into the Model T, I think they stopped making the Model T this year, actually, in 1929. There's a lot of other automobile companies as well, and people have cars, and that means that you can live far away from where you work. I mean, at least relatively compared to, you know, the 19th century. So seeing that, okay, we can build towns cheaper and efficiently, and especially if we make all the homes kind of the same, build track homes. Oh, we can build homes the way we build Model Ts, right? It's efficient, and it makes home ownership a little bit more possible for more middle-class Americans. But it comes at a cost too, right? It comes at the fracturing of kind of civic community life, where you're living with all the goods and services that you need in the city, right? You're down the street from the lawyer and the banker and the butcher and, you know, all the other things that you need in life to function. So this idea of suburbia it's just gonna grow and expand throughout the 20th century. We're gonna see that really pop off after the war. And a direct result of that, though, is white flight. It's wealthier middle class white people fleeing cities to live in suburbs that are cleaner and safer and maybe more segregated. Even in states where segregation is not the rule of law, there's going to be something called redlining, where the kind of realtors association of the city will have an agreement to not sell neighborhoods in this section or this whole part of the city to people of color. But in this other zone that we've scooped out, yeah, they can buy houses there. So a great example out here is Sun Village, out by like Little Rock. Been through Sun Village, it's like Palmdale Boulevard and 90th East. Jackie Robinson Park's out there. I grew up out there, so I used to live out there. And like, it never really occurred to me until I was older. And I'm like, man, that's kind of weird. It's way out in the sticks. There's a bunch of black people that live out there. Like a lot of black people live out there. That's seems strange, like, because it's so out in the middle of nowhere. Oh, it's because like that's the only place they could buy houses before the 60s or 70s. Like it was redlined out here too. So suburbs have a way of driving segregation even unofficially. I'm gonna actually see if I can find I used to have this bookmarked. Oh, this would be good if this is updated. Okay, cool. There we go. Now I want this. It's only going to be of. Okay, so green is non-Hispanic or Latino population, Native American, Alaskan Native. Blue is Asian, yellow is Black. Hispanic is, well, what is that color? That's hard to see. There we go. Like this kind of gray green. White will be brown. So, okay, let's go look at New York City here. It's very densely populated. So you can see like, okay, there are definitely Black areas of New York City. And there's also heavily Asian areas of New York City or heavily Latino areas of New York City. But if we go down to Manhattan, that's white people. Like the brown is white. This is Chinatown right here. That's why it's a lot of Asian people that live there. And here's Harlem, which is gentrifying. It's becoming less brown, but you can see the segregation of people across cities. I mean, we can do this with like any city. Philadelphia, there is a Black part of Philadelphia and a white part of Philadelphia. I mean, you can see it clearly in our cities today. Let's go Washington, D.C. How about that? This is like the mall. This is all the political stuff. This is white, 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 white. Alexandria is largely white. It's a rich part. And you can see where the Black people in Washington, D.C. live. They live east of the river, like pretty much down the line. Let's tootle over and look at like Dallas. Dallas looks pretty segregated by race when you look at the, where people are living. Let's look at Los Angeles, shall we? Let's see here. Okay. LA, like you've got like East and South LA is pretty solidly Hispanic. You got like Inglewood, the LAX area, right? It's like this is where Black people live. This is Compton, right? This is South LA. All along the beach, Santa Monica down to like Redondo is white people. Beverly Hills, white people. The Hollywood Hills, right? It's white people. This is where white people live. They live in these expensive parts of the city. San Fernando Valley is a lot more kind of mixed. Let's look at Lancaster. That is truly telling of our area, though. Look at, I mean, that is like a mix. Everything is mixed here. Like it's way less racially segregated than some other places. But yeah, like, so look, this is Sun Village, though. You can see where it was. You can see the population of Black people being a little bit more intermingled there. It's interesting. Well, that's kind of what we're looking forward to in terms of suburbia and the changes of that. What we'll see happen in the kind of 50s and 60s is a real like pushback against suburbia from younger people though, because there's something very stifling about individuality and creativity and all those things. A, being segregated, I think stifles that, but B, like having things be monotonous and uniform it does that too, which I don't have to tell you guys that we can feel the effects of that here. We've got the most boring architecture in America in the Antelope Valley. It's bad. Everything looks like a Walmart. Yeah.
It's actually scientific segregation separated by reasons. Very scientific.
Yeah.
How to create and water.
Yeah. To tie it back into kind of our earlier discussion on Scope's monkey trial and fundamentalism and all of that, in the 60s and 70s, when the federal government is forcing desegregation at schools, even to the point of busing kids in from other, different zones so that they're not so segregated. This is when we have the proliferation of like white, predominantly white, evangelical, private Christian schools. It's to avoid integration. That's why they are started. Desert Christian was started for that reason, right? Paraclete's a different story. The Catholic Church has been doing their own schools and stuff like that since before America had public schools. So, more traditional private schools like that's a different story. But ones that were started in like the 70s that are like Protestant churches are largely they came out of a rise from that. And that's all tied in with the Falwells and the whole plan. Like it's the tentacles of all of that they've reached very far out from just beyond, fundamentalism and teaching evolution versus creationism. It's affecting our very educational system to the core. All right, let's